Rory.
Order. Order. I call this meeting to order. Order, everyone. Thank you. This is the Standing Committee of Veterans Affairs. My name is Chris Palmer, MLA for Kings West and chair of this committee. Today, we will hear from presenters regarding the impacts of the healthcare crisis at the Camp Hill Hospital. So at this point, I'd like to ask everybody to please turn off your cell phones and put them on silent, please. And in case of an emergency, just a reminder that we'll use the Granville Street exit and walk up to the Grand Parade. At this point, I'd like to ask all of our committee members to introduce themselves, beginning with the Vice Chair on my left, MLA Barkos.
Good afternoon, Danielle Barkos, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's.
Good afternoon, Johnny McDonald for MLA for Hantseast, sitting in for Mr. Harris.
Hi there, Tom Taggart, Colchester North. Welcome.
Hi, Steve Craig, MLA for Sackville-Cobequid. Nice to see you here this afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Kendra Coombs, the MLA for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier.
Good afternoon and welcome. Tony Ince, MLA for Cole Harbour.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Regan. I'm the MLA for Bedford Basin. Here subbing in for one of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'd also like to note the presence of Chief Legislative Counsel Gordon Hebb on my left, and Legislative Committee Clerk Tamara Naseba on my right, and new Legislative Support Clerk James DeSalis. Welcome, James. This afternoon, everyone, our topic is the impacts of the healthcare crisis on Camp Hill. And at this point, I'd like to ask all of our witnesses to introduce themselves, and then I'll give you all an opportunity to give an opening statement after that. So we'll begin with Mr. Stevenson.
Good afternoon. My name is Colin Stevenson. I'm the Chief of System Integration with the Department of Health and Wellness.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tracey Barbrick, the newly appointed Deputy Minister with Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather White, and I'm the Health Services Director for Camp Hill Veterans Services and Geriatrics with Nova Scotia Health.
Thank you. And we'd like to give you all an opportunity to provide some opening remarks. So, Mr. Stevenson, I believe we'll begin with you. Mr. Stevenson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. I'm pleased to be here with Deputy Minister Barbrick and Ms. White to answer your questions about the impact of widespread issues like labor shortages and lack of beds, and how they're having an impact on Camp Hill and their ability to give the best possible care to our veterans. Before turning it over to my colleagues to speak to services specifically at Camp Hill, I would like to speak to our efforts to improve health care for all Nova Scotians, including veterans. The challenges and pressures our healthcare system has experienced is not unique to Nova Scotia. Healthcare systems across Canada and around the world are navigating similar concerns like a growing, aging, and sicker population, loss of staff and challenges in recruitment, and aging infrastructure and equipment. These are complex problems that require many strategies to address. What works in one jurisdiction may not work in another. However, we know that having a modern, innovative, responsive, and resilient healthcare system helps to address challenges as they arise. What sets us apart in Nova Scotia is government's Action for Health plan. The Departments of Health and Wellness and Seniors and Long-Term Care with Nova Scotia Health are working to implement this plan. Action for Health is about real change. Change that will come from investments in people, tools, technology, and infrastructure over both the short and long term. Investments have already been made, and we are starting to feel that change. Investments in tools and technology, like the Care Coordination Center at the QE2 Health Center, that provides healthcare teams with real-time information so patients can get better, faster care. Investments in surgical and diagnostic services, resulting in a reduction in the number of people waiting for surgery and other procedures. Investments in people like incentives and retention bonuses for current healthcare professionals, and changes in recruitment efforts like partnerships with other countries to support the recruitment of internationally trained healthcare professionals. This includes working with the colleges and regulatory bodies that license healthcare professionals in our province to improve and fast-track the licensing process for out-of-province and internationally trained healthcare workers. We are also investing to improve access to primary healthcare with more collaborative care locations, increasing support and use of virtual care, mobile clinics, and most recently, pharmacy primary care clinics in communities around the province. We understand the frustration Nova Scotians feel when they are unable to access a healthcare service close to home or experience a long wait, and we're making changes to provide more care faster. And of course, Action for Health is not about ensuring that is also about ensuring we have the right infrastructure and support to support healthcare transformation in our province for patients and providers. More Faster, the Action for Health build is about building the facilities we need so Nova Scotians get better healthcare services more quickly. That means more beds, more operating rooms, newer and larger emergency departments. Before I hand it over to Deputy Minister Barbrick, I want to say that we will continue to work with our partners to better understand and improve the healthcare needs of all Nova Scotians, including our veterans, because we value and appreciate the service they have all provided to Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And we'd like to give our new Deputy Minister, Ms. Barbrick, an opportunity to share some opening comments.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to be here this afternoon. My name is Tracey Barbrick. Thank you for inviting us to be here with Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care. I'm pleased to join the witnesses that are colleagues of mine that we work together regularly. Today's topic is the delivery of care at Camp Hill. Camp Hill is a hospital run by Nova Scotia Health that provides a range of healthcare services, including long-term care, to veterans as well as other Nova Scotians. Of the 175 beds at Camp Hill, our department funds and licenses 67 of those with our provincial long-term care inventory. Those 67 beds are for Nova Scotians who need this level of care and operate like beds in other long-term care facilities in the province. We know that Camp Hill holds a special place in the hearts of Nova Scotians, a place that provides care to those who have served our country. Heather, who is here today, along with all her colleagues at Camp Hill, are committed to providing the highest level of care to veterans, as well as the 67 other Nova Scotians who live there. Veterans have earned the respect of our country, and they deserve to age with dignity, as do all seniors in our province. They have contributed so much to the remarkable province that we enjoy today. With the 67 spaces we fund, while the 67 spaces we fund are not limited to spouses of veterans, they have allowed many spouses of veterans to live with their loved ones and continue their lives together. The Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care was formed to focus on the unique needs of older Nova Scotians in all facets of their life. Our province is aging, and the need for more services and supports will grow. Our department has been focused on stabilizing the continuing care system to ensure the support and care older Nova Scotians need are there when they need them. We are accomplishing this through a number of strategic investments in our continuing care workforce, in new and expanded home and community care services, and in improving and adding long-term care rooms. We are working to train and attract new workers and support the dedicated people working in our sector. Part of how we're doing this is by covering the tuition and books for 2,000 students who want to become CCAs in our province. Government also provided current CCAs with a targeted pay raise and provided those working on the front lines of healthcare and continuing care with retention and recruitment bonuses. We're also recruiting nationally and internationally and delivering on government's commitment to provide an average of 4.1 hours of care per day for all residents in long-term care facilities. These are just a few examples that are helping Nova Scotians ensure Nova Scotians can count on getting the care and support they need as they age. Part of this work includes having long-term care spaces available when people need them. Work is underway to add 1,200 new spaces to the system and improve 2,300 other spaces by 2027. This means that the total number of long-term care spaces in the province will go from 8,000 today to about 9,200 in 2027. We know that waiting to get into long-term care can be incredibly stressful on individuals and their loved ones. Increasing capacity in long-term care by adding more rooms and improving those already in the system will help us meet the needs of our province today and into the future. We look forward to answering your questions after Heather speaks.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Ms. White.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon about Camp Hill Veterans Services. Camp Hill Veterans Memorial Building includes a 175-room long-term care facility with a long and proud history of serving veterans. Nova Scotia Health is contracted by Veterans Affairs Canada to provide outstanding long-term care services to veterans, and we are pleased to now have 108 rooms at Camp Hill that are fully dedicated to the care of veterans. Veterans Affairs Canada determines eligibility for admission to our veteran beds and manages our wait list. Prior to 2016, admission to Camp Hill was reserved for those who were deemed by Veterans Affairs Canada to be contract eligible, meaning that they had served our country overseas in World War II or Korea. At Camp Hill, we currently have 26 contract eligible veterans with an average age of 97. As the demand for contract-eligible veteran beds declined over recent years, Veterans Affairs Canada did expand access to Camp Hill to a new cohort of veterans. In 2016, a designated number of beds were made available for veterans that were deemed eligible for a preferred admission bed. And in November of 2022, Veterans Affairs Canada removed the cap on the number of veteran beds that we were able to allocate to veterans who were eligible for preferred admission. This flexibility has allowed us to improve access to Camp Hill to this new cohort of veterans and has solidified the role Camp Hill will continue to play in caring for Canada's veterans. In addition to improving access, this announcement also had a positive impact on our ability to recruit and retain staff, as for many, it is caring for this esteemed population of individuals that holds particular significance. In addition to the 108 veteran beds, we now also have 67 beds that are licensed and funded by the Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care for provincial residents. The licensing of long-term care beds at Camp Hill allows us to reach full capacity and provides the added benefit of allowing us to admit spouses of veterans who otherwise would not have been eligible for admission to Camp Hill. Since the Life Partners and Long-Term Care Act was passed in 2021, we have reunited 14 spouses with veterans and residents within our facility, which has been a truly wonderful addition. Over the past few years, there's been significant capital investment by Nova Scotia Health to Camp Hill Veterans Memorial Building. Improvements include new elevators, handrails, repair of the exterior envelope of the building, a new call bell system, and we're looking forward to an upcoming project that will see all of our common spaces painted and refreshed. These capital investments are a welcome boost for the veterans, residents, and staff at Camp Hill. The past few years have been challenging in healthcare, and our facility is no exception. We continue to work on creative ways to try and meet new clinical needs and address the human resource challenges that we are experiencing. But with challenge comes opportunity, and we're focused on how to best use the talent, the skills, and the resources among our various health disciplines to meet the care needs of the veterans and residents we serve. And we're excited about some of the innovative changes we're making. As examples, we are expanding the role of continuing care team assistants, and we've introduced a new palliative care nurse practitioner role at the facility. Ensuring our teams are well supported to provide compassionate and skilled end-of-life care is an important and highly valued part of the work we do. Like all healthcare system partners, we remain focused on recruiting and retaining staff of all disciplines. And while our staff vacancy rate suggests we're in a similar position to last year, it's important to note that we welcomed over 100 staff to Veterans Services in 2023 alone. This past week, we welcomed 8 new internationally educated nurses who we know will be a great addition to our team. With the change in our workforce, we've identified a need to support our frontline teams with dedicated clinical leadership. We've introduced a new role of clinical practice leads at Camp Hill. 4 of our experienced registered nurses now take dedicated time to mentor and support our teams to deliver a high standard of care to veterans, residents, and families. During the pandemic, visitor restrictions were very challenging, and we're thrilled to once again be able to welcome volunteers and visitors to engage with our community. At Camp Hill, we consider families, friends, and volunteers to all be part of our team, and we're greatly appreciative of the support they offer and the difference they make in the quality of life of those who live at Camp Hill. While we are still at only about 50% of the volunteers we had prior to the pandemic, there is active volunteer recruitment underway, and we hope that number will continue to grow. We're so grateful for the strong connections we have with many community partners, including the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Legion, UN NATO Veterans, Veterans Farm Project, the Mooseheads hockey team, and many, many more who participate in our commemorative and community events throughout the year. As we prepare to enter 2024 and recognize the 85th anniversary of the start of World War II, we remain as committed as ever to our mandate to provide the highest standard of care to veterans in grateful recognition of their service to our country. I look forward to the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White, and thank you to all of you for your opening statements. Look forward to the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon. So I'd like to remind everyone here that this we'll do questions by show of hands. I'll try to recognize everybody when I see hands go up. We'll have one question at a time so we can kind of keep the questions going for our members here to be able to ask you, and look forward to hearing your answers. So at this point, we'll open the questions up, and we'll go till about 3:40. Because we'll have a bit of committee business to do after that. So I'll open the floor up now. So I'm going to begin with MLA Coombs, who had her hand up, and then MLA Inns.
Thank you. Director White, during your opening statement, you mentioned the changes in eligibility. So I'm wondering if you could tell me what is the eligibility to Camp Hill?
Ms. White.
So Veterans Affairs Canada determines eligibility for veterans beds that they fund, and so and it is complex in terms of the legislation that determines that eligibility for benefits. So I would defer to Veterans Affairs Canada kind of around that. But I do know it does include veterans who have served who also have a pensionable health condition. But there's many nuances to that determination of eligibility that the Veterans Affairs Canada themselves would be best positioned to answer.
Thank you. MLA Inns.
Thank you. Ms. White, my question's to you. Is there a wait list? And if so, how long is the wait list for Camp Hill?
Ms. White.
So Veterans Affairs Canada also manages our wait list. So I don't have the exact numbers. They would have that. I do know that there does continue to be a wait list, though we have made significant progress with that since the change in November of 2022.
Thank you. MLA Taggart.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and Ms. White, thank you for the work that you folks do to the people that we owe so very much, so very greatly appreciated. So I'm also wondering what sort of programming or healthcare offerings exist at Camp Hill? Like, I understand you have, foot care, primary care, some dental care, and that kind of thing. What other sort of services do you folks provide?
Ms. White.
Sure. So we're very fortunate. We have a robust interprofessional team that really tries to wrap around what are the various individual needs of veterans as well as and residents, and what and informs the service we deliver. So we have a strong recreation therapy and music therapy program that would offer a lot of programming and therapeutic support. We have spiritual cares. We have our social work team, physiotherapy, occupational therapy. We also have a strong complement of our nursing team that can offer care. And so we're quite fortunate, I think, to really have a strong interprofessional team and to meet the needs of the residents and veterans we serve.
Thank you. MLA Marcos.
Thank you. I'm really interested in there being non-veteran beds at Camp Hill. I'm wondering if you can outline how it maximizes capacity both with the Camp Hill and with the wider long-term care system. I talk with my hands too much. And that would be to Deputy Minister Barbrick or Mrs. White.
So who would like to take that one first, or Ms. White or Ms. Deputy Minister? Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Thanks for the question. I'll start, and Heather, if you have anything to add, we'll go from there. But certainly the province, as a result of COVID, there was a time where we had about 500 of our beds in the system were closed because of infectious disease and managing that. So we had quite a stretch where wait lists grew during that time. And when we started to come out of COVID, our interest was in maximizing capacity everywhere we could possibly do so. So we've, of course, announced the addition of 3,500 beds to the provincial system. And on top of that, we looked for opportunities where we had vacant beds in the province for other purposes that we might be able to access. So we worked closely with Veterans Affairs Canada to identify any beds that they had in the province that were continuously vacant because they didn't have eligible residents that were able to move into those facilities. And we made arrangements to at least temporarily fund those beds to make sure that we had Nova Scotians benefiting from any capacity that we had in the system. So that was, it emerged through COVID, and after COVID, we continued that arrangement any place that Veterans Affairs Canada identified that they had beds that were not occupied.
Ms. White, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. Yes, I think just to add to that, I think we historically have always been able to utilize vacant beds that we have at Camp Hill when there wasn't an eligible veteran in need of the bed. We've always been able to utilize them for individuals awaiting placement, and certainly very proud of our team and how they stepped up to support a large number of people awaiting placement and ensure beds were utilized during COVID with all the stressors in the system. I think the ability to now have funded and licensed beds does allow those individuals to stay at Camp Hill who have come to live here, and I can't underscore enough, working Camp Hill for a long time, the ability to now admit spouses of veterans and residents has greatly added to the quality of life of those who live here too.
Thank you very much. MLA Regan.
Thank you, and shout out to DM Barbrick's dad, who is watching today at home. I guess I would just sort of go back and sort of ask a stats question. Do we know how many, do you call them patients or residents at Camp Hill?
Ms. White.
So we are a long-term care facility, not a hospital. We do work to really honor the fact that Camp Hill is a home to those who live here. Now, we also have patients within the Camp Hill building, but within our long-term care facility, it is home to those who live there. So we would refer to veterans as veterans and residents, the provincial residents, as residents.
That actually wasn't my question. I just wanted to use the right terminology.
Okay. I'll squeeze one out for you there. Go ahead.
So,
MLA Regan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So how many residents and veterans at Camp Hill have died of COVID since March 2020 and then since September of 2021?
Ms. White.
So I don't have that exact number with me today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think there's a request. We can go to the clerk afterwards for information on that. Thank you. I have MLA Craig and then MLA Coombs and then MLA McDonald. MLA Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here on such an important topic. I want to delve into a little bit more. Certainly I'd mentioned, Ms. White, that my father passed away in Camp Hill many years ago, and my mother passed away in another facility, long-term care facility, back in 2013. And so it interests me as to the process. I'm glad to hear that there are beds assigned for veterans at Camp Hill, and also that there are beds for non-veterans, and specifically around spousal veterans, spouses of veterans. Can you explain to me the process that it is to identify the veteran and the spouse of a veteran, and how they are actually take up residence at Camp Hill? So perhaps, Deputy, that you could explain that from your point of view, and Ms. White perhaps from her point of view.
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Yeah, thanks for that question, because it is where there are Veterans Affairs beds in Camp Hill as well as provincial beds, it is a bit of a, confusing, separating those two pieces around processes. It is a little bit more complicated than some sites. But essentially, when a person is deemed eligible by a continuing care assessment that they now need full-time long-term care in a nursing home, the person gets to identify some of their priority placement options. So they can list as many as they want. So if a person had a veteran that was in one of the Camp Hill Veterans Affairs Canada beds, they would identify that they had a spouse there and their request was to be placed in the same facility in one of our 67 licensed provincial nursing home beds. That puts them in what's considered a priority 2 category behind only our adult protection residents that need immediate removal from a certain circumstance. So right behind that is spouses of somebody that's already in that same facility. So they would identify Camp Hill as their preference, and we would go about through our single entry system of provincial beds, making a match with Camp Hill. So as of right now, for our provincial residents, there actually isn't a wait list for Camp Hill. So if you had a spouse right now, the next available bed in our 67 nursing home beds would go to that person.
Ms. White, would you like to add anything to that?
I think that kind of covered it. Basically, I think a family would identify that that was their preference, and then when we do have a vacancy, we would look to admit that spouse or partner, and then we work towards, depending on what their needs are, of trying to have them co-located on a unit. Yeah.
Thank you. MLA Coombs.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get my numbers correct. So I'm just wondering, Director White, if Director White, if you could just kind of outline how many beds are filled by veteran spouses, and other residents.
Ms. White.
So quickly, so as of today, we currently have all 108 beds are allocated to veterans. We have, I believe, 6 spouses currently living at Camp Hill, and we have 60, but they would be within our footprint of 67 DSLD, Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care beds. 67. So we have 175 total, 108 are veterans, 67 are licensed Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care beds.
Thank you. MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is for Ms. White. So as I was 85 years next year, I couldn't believe, and of course we're coming up to Veterans Day, or Remembrance Day, I should say. And I'm just wondering, what does Camp Hill do for activities for our veterans that are there, so that they realize that we still totally respect and thankful for what they've done over the years.
Ms. White.
Thank you for that question. It's certainly a very important part of what we do. So there's a number of things. I'll start with kind of looking at our veteran population. We do honor a number of different commemorative events and milestones when we have veterans who have served in different conflicts. So for instance, for Korea, we would have held an anniversary event this year in July 27th for the signing of the armistice, and then we would also look to do some recognition over different events. So, for instance, this past weekend we were honoring the Battle of Britain, and upcoming for Remembrance Week we have a really full slate of activities. It begins with our candlelight service, which is a very meaningful tradition that we hold at the start of Veterans Week, and then we have a large service that's held on November 11th out at the Cenotaph. We're extremely fortunate to have a lot of support from the Canadian Armed Forces, so we have a large contingent of volunteers who attend all of those commemorative events and escort veterans to the event, enabling them to participate, and that honoring that special bond, I think, that exists between those who have served and those who continue to serve our country. We also do additional programming that helps to honor that veteran community through events with the Royal Canadian Legion, events with having the Stadacona Military Band come during Remembrance Week. The Stad Band does a fabulous concert when duty called, and that is in honor of the veterans who live at Camp Hill, and it's just a very memorable Remembrance Day service. So there's a host of things we do throughout the year, and we do strive to honor particular anniversaries and milestones. Working now, I think, with the Korean government, who's looking to honor some of our veterans who served in the Korea War with a medal. So we do work with different groups to try and support those very, very meaningful connections for the community.
Thank you. I think we have MLA Regan next.
I'd just like to talk to you a bit about staffing vacancies right now. I'm just looking for the number of RN, LPN, and CCA vacancies currently.
And that's directed to?
Ms. White.
Ms. White. Ms. White.
Sure. So I will say that we are currently, we've just implemented a change in our model of care. We're really working hard to leverage the skill set of all the different disciplines and really maximizing the skills and responding to feedback that we've heard from staff, residents, veterans, and families. So currently, as of today, we have we've increased the number of continuing care assistants on our team. So that is the one we have the greatest vacancy because we're recruiting more into that. So we have 20.4 vacancies for continuing care assistants, though of that, I will note we have successfully hired 14.6 FTEs of that group and just awaiting their start dates. We have 5.8 additional positions we're looking to fill. Licensed practical nurses, we have 10.4 vacancies. We have 3.2 that are, again, hired and awaiting a start date, 7.2 that we're continuing to recruit for. And currently with our RNs, we have 4 vacancies, and we actually have 4 people hired and awaiting start dates for those. So we are working really hard. Now, things do change each day. With the opportunities that are out there for our workforce, but we are making progress, I think.
Okay. Thank you. We're not going to have any follow-up questions. MLA Regan? Yep. Right now, are you asking for a follow-up, or do you want to be on the list?
I want to be on the list with a follow-up.
Okay. Thank you. MLA Barkos.
I understand there's been some infrastructure improvements over the last few years. I'm wondering if you're able to outline those in more detail and the effect it has on staff and residents.
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Sure, thanks. You might be sorry for that question because I could probably talk all day about this piece. It's a very exciting time in the business of continuing care. There had largely been an underinvestment in infrastructure in a long, long time. So right now we're in the process of building 34 new nursing homes, single rooms, single bathrooms across the province. So there are 27 replacement facilities and another 7 net new buildings that will be going up in Central Zone. And we've also added a lot of capacity in some of the replacement facilities that had been announced, and we still had the chance to bundle in some more beds. So we really are building 3,500 new rooms across the province. 1,200 of those are net new. So we currently have about 8,000 licensed nursing homes in the province. There will be 9,200 of them by 2027. So in addition to the staffing recruitment efforts that Heather outlined, working in modern facilities that are well maintained and managed is one of the things that helps recruit and retain people in the sector. And in addition, adds capacity to the system that, of course, is just overtaxed for a number of reasons. So that we've actually just opened, Villa Acadienne opened on Saturday this week past. In fact, 144 residents were moved right before the hurricane plane landed successfully, and so that was one of our early additions of facilities, and the rest will unfold and open over the next couple of years. So it's a really exciting time. And the single room, single bathroom, all the things we learned from COVID and infectious disease management, those things are really tremendous game changers.
Well, you didn't have all afternoon, but till 3:40 you could have kept on, but no. Ms. White, did you have a comment to make about that? You look like you were on to...
Well, just, I can speak kind of specific to some capital infrastructure ones at Camp Hill, because there certainly has been some significant investment. There's been a number, I guess. We've introduced new tempering valves at all our water points to ensure that the domestic hot water is accurate. Upgrades to our fire safety system, replacing some of the doors. All of the handrails within the building have been replaced. Additional upgrades to the heat and hot water facilities, new elevators, exterior envelope issues. The main kitchen for Nova Scotia, for QE2 as well as for Camp Hill, is in the Veterans Memorial Building, and it's had significant upgrades there. We've introduced a new nurse call system. It's currently being put in throughout the building, which is going to be fabulous. New upgrades to our air conditioning or chillers, and some new upgrades for the kitchen team. We are also awaiting a new capital project investment to do all the painting of all of our common areas and spaces, which staff are thrilled about, and as our residents. And I will just also note that we've had some capital investments through the QE2 Foundation by generous donors that have also helped. So the commissioners supported us with getting a new bladder scanner. We've had multiple Legions donate some additional furniture to the building. And tomorrow we are going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony for a brand new activity pad out in our garden, which is kind of a jewel of Camp Hill, is our garden space. And so it is an activity pad that will allow wheelchair accessible bocce and different events to happen. So that's really through the generosity of the Mooseheads hockey team and the QE2 Foundation Legions who have donated. So they'll all be coming for that inaugural bocce game tomorrow afternoon rather.
Thank you. MLA Inns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. White, is the mental health care in the facility being administered by a qualified professional? For example, psychiatrists, social workers, psychiatric nurses, etc.
Ms. White.
So we're fortunate that a number of our nurses, including all of our clinical practice leads, either have their advanced certification in gerontological nursing or are in the process of completing it. So that is one key element. We also have 2 social workers within our program who work with our team. We have a psychologist position that we're funded through for Veterans Affairs Canada. That's been a little more challenging to access care, but we do now have that position filled. We're just awaiting them to be able to start. So that we have those services all kind of within our interprofessional team, and a strong core knowledge of dementia care and that support. We also have the opportunity, and we do, when there is an identified need, to link with seniors' mental health or with our colleagues in mental health for additional support and consultation. So they will come on site, provide recommendations, and help our teams with follow-up as well.
Thank you. MLA Taggart.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Minister Barbrick, we've heard a lot about the work of the Action for Healthcare, and can you tell us a little bit about how this plan improves healthcare for veterans and residents at Camp Hill?
Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Yeah, sorry, that took me a second. I was thinking about the scope of that question. So I think some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years that have allowed us to sort of increase the quality of care more generally is, first of all, ensuring that we can supply a workforce to the facilities across the province. So we were in pretty bad shape a couple of years ago. It had been, continuing care had felt the impact of workforce shortages, I think, more than any other element of acute care. So a lot of the priorities identified in the Action for Health that related to continuing care really were focused on growing a workforce. So the primary piece was the 2,000 free tuition, free books over 2 years for CCAs across the province. So right now we have had just shy of 1,500 CCAs enroll and work through their training and are at different stages of completion over the last year and a half. So we're on track to complete 2,000 and assess what the needs will be for year 3. So that's been a tremendous support. The other is the development of a work and learn model where people can go back to school and become a certified CCA while not losing their income because they're able to work a couple of days a week and go to school 3 days a week. And they can also take some shifts on the weekend if they're able to, and actually earn an income while they're in school, which is unusual from the old traditional way of going to school where you left employment and had to live without an income. So we're finding that that is, in fact, about 50% of our students are choosing that work and learn model as a viable path for them. So that's been a tremendous help. The other thing that we've done is made recognition of prior learning programs are all free. So if somebody has been working in the sector for a couple of years and they would like to be assessed against the CCA qualifications, a gap can be identified. They can go through the training to fill that gap and become a CCA that really their income now is about $25 an hour, which is quite a fair difference from where it was a few years ago. So that too is bringing people that have worked in the facilities over the years, maybe as part of their housekeeping or dietary staff, but didn't have a certification and have chosen to upskill through that recognition of prior learning process to become certified. So we've brought about 900 people in just in the last just shy of 2 years to be certified CCAs through that path. So again, most of the actions in the Action for Health for this sector have been about building that workforce up, and we're having lots of positive signals that we're getting there, and we have work left to do. As Heather identified, there's still gaps at Camp Hill as they work hard to recruit for their CCA positions as well.
Thank you, Deputy. Amelia Coombs.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Director White, if you could discuss the challenges with staffing and more specifically retention, because recruiting is sometimes can be the easiest part, although it doesn't seem so, but it can be the easiest part. It's the retaining of the staff that often is the most difficult part. So I'm wondering if you could tell us about what are the specific challenges at Camp Hill with regards to retaining staff?
Ms. White.
Well, first off, I would say, and I alluded to it in my remarks, I think knowing that we now can allocate up to 108 beds for that preferred admission cohort, and having that stability of future direction for veterans has helped our ability to retain staff for whom caring for veterans is particularly important. I think I don't think there's one answer as to how we can best retain staff. Certainly as part of Nova Scotia Health, when employees come to work at Camp Hill, they are internal candidates then for any position within Nova Scotia Health, which certainly is a great opportunity for people to continue to develop their career path, but can sometimes be a challenge because there are many different opportunities for them to apply to. When we've kind of looked at it, reviewed with staff, exit interviews, I think a lot of it is how do we best support new people coming on board and wrapping around the right supports for them so that they can feel successful and that they're utilizing the full scope of their training. That's what we're aiming to do with the model of care work that we're currently doing, and the addition of those clinical practice leads who really are there to help provide some clinical mentorship for many of our staff who are earlier in their career And we're firm believers that working within geriatrics and long-term care is a fabulous sector to work in. And it's really having those champions that really have created that passion for the population and role modeling that I think helps to retain people.
As nice as you asked, I have to say no. We'll have to put that on your next round, please. MLA McDonald, MLA Reagan, and then MLA Barkos. MLA McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this for Ms. White. I mean, you touched on mental health quickly, but this government's put a big pressure on mental health, and we wound up having a couple of pilot projects. And in June, we had Seamless Canada here talking about how important mental health is. I'm just wondering if you wanted to speak to more about what mental health supports are available at Camp Hill and unique circumstances of engaging with veterans.
Ms. White?
Sure. So I think I touched on some of the disciplines that would be involved in providing that really holistic care. I think a couple that I thought of that I didn't highlight that I think are unique to our population. We do have spiritual care, which can be quite helpful, as well as music therapy. And again, for helping people from a dementia care perspective is key. But I think all of the disciplines, social work, psychology, spiritual care, and then our nurse practitioner, our family physicians who provide primary care, all have a core set of skills and the ability to access specialist services as required. So either through seniors mental health or through psychiatry if as needed. Yeah.
Thank you. MLA Reagan.
So I asked you about, in my previous question, I asked you about vacancies for RNs, LPNs, and CCAs, and you gave me the number and said, but you know, a certain number of them are awaiting start date. I find it odd that we would have people, we're still including them in the list of openings. I guess you would, if you'd hired them and they had started, you wouldn't include them. But I'm surprised we don't have start dates right away. If there's an opening, one would think they would start the following week or two. Can you explain why we have people who have been hired, but they don't have their start date yet?
Ms. White.
So there can be a number of pieces, I think, with that. If they're internal candidates, perhaps who have started, first, let me backtrack. We did do a significant number of postings as we look to implement this model of care. So that is part of that, of the answer to that question. But there are a variety of different reasons that start dates could be delayed. It could be that they're already currently working in another part of the health system, and that area can't free them up to come to us until they've been able to kind of help to recruit. So we do try and work in partnership with the services that they would be being recruited or coming from, so that we are all kind of working together on that. And then with our new staff, our hiring and onboarding, it may just take a little bit of time to get all their occupational health screening and all their HR paperwork, and again, being released from whichever position they may have had prior to coming to us as well. So those are all positions that we're posted and actively recruiting for over the last number of weeks. So those start dates are within the next few weeks that they'll be starting with us. Yeah.
Thank you. MLA Barkos.
Thank you, Chair. I know you cannot speak to the details of Veterans Affairs Canada's decision, and this is going to Ms. White, but can you outline changes that were made to expand eligibility to more veterans? And earlier you stated preferred admissions. Is that tie into this, or I don't know what preferred admissions is? Okay, thank you.
Ms. White.
Thank you. So within Veterans Affairs Canada, as part of their benefit eligibility, there are two different types of beds that they can admit to. The contract eligible would always have priority access. Those would be individuals who served in World War II or Korea. preferred admission would qualify through Veterans Affairs Canada for long-term care support, but they may have served perhaps after Korea. They may be an allied veteran who serve. They may be a Canada Service veteran. There's a lot of complexities around eligibility, and which is why I would defer to Veterans Affairs Canada around that to answer that. But it is a kind of a broader group of veterans who have been deemed to have eligibility for benefits by Veterans Affairs Canada for long-term care service.
Thank you, Ms. White. MLA Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Very interesting listening to some of your answers, and I'm particularly heartened by the fact that we are making efforts to hire, train, educate, retrain in some cases, and bring people back into the healthcare system. And I want to thank you all for your roles in that. Deputy Barbrick, those initiatives, if you'd like to expand on them a little bit, I'd like to hear that. However, too, Director White, you mentioned what you're doing, and I was very happy to hear that you had this, regardless of the start date. It's very close, so it's not an insignificant point on me that we've got these and we've got some people. But I'm wondering about the interrelationship between both your areas and how you work together and how you see the actions of government now benefiting Camp Hill in particular when it comes to filling these vacancies. You alluded and it touched on a little bit, but I wonder if you could draw sort of that Venn, where that crossover is and where we get the value for the efforts.
So who would like to begin with that one, where it's a question of collaboration? Maybe we'll start with Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try to hold a thread there and not go down too many rabbit holes. So, in addition to some of those kind of recruitment, training, retention pieces that I didn't mention from earlier that I would add because I think it's part of the provincial view of workforce, is on top of the free training and the recognition of prior learning, making things as easy as we can make it for people to attach to the workforce, to upskill, to stay in the workforce, to return to the workforce if they've left or left this sector. Everything we can do to streamline, we continue to look for opportunities to do that. We have just announced our first continuing care assistant to licensed practical nurse pathway. It's our first cohort of 25 students as a pilot that all will come from the continuing care sector together and move from CCA certification to LPN certification over a period of 2 years for free tuition, free books, free all of the things, to make it very easy for those students. With a return of service agreement to stay in the continuing care sector, because the benefit of people that have either worked in the sector, either from home care and moved to long-term care, or worked in dietary and became a CCA, or were a CCA, become an LPN, is that they know the sector and they know they want to work in it. So, young people come out of school, they're deciding where they want to spend some of their career, and they're drawn to certain areas naturally. What we know about anyone that's working in continuing care is they're there because it's a mission, and we want to keep them there. So we want to create lots of pathways for people to, work in one role for a few years and then decide they want to upskill and take on another role. So that CCA LPN will be the first group we put through together. They'll study together, they'll take their exams together and all of that sort of thing. So we're expecting good things from that to show up. And again, that sort of work and learn model, we're seeing lots of opportunity on that side. As far as the synergies between kind of the elements of the Veterans Affairs kind of capacity and our seniors in long-term care provincial residents is that there are people for whom might not qualify under the Veterans Affairs eligibility process, but they have an affinity because they've maybe were in the Canadian Armed Forces at some point or were married to somebody in the Canadian Armed Forces. They know the culture, they're drawn to Camp Hill because it aligns with their values, and even though they aren't technically maybe qualified under Veterans Affairs Canada or under the preferred placement option, they can see and attach to Camp Hill as a culture. So I think that's what we're seeing from our kind of provincial residents, is those that identify as their preferred location is Camp Hill is because they have an affinity to the culture and the history of the veterans that live there, and there seems to be an alignment.
Ms. White?
Yeah, I think I would just add that I think any initiative that helps increase the number of skilled and trained healthcare professionals is going to help us, and we certainly have benefited from different initiatives we have. And I would also say that anything that supports people in furthering their education and their career path also helps from a retention and a recruitment perspective. We definitely have a few CTAs. I don't have the exact number, but we definitely have a number of CTAs who are now being able to be eligible to be internationally educated nurses and pursue the full scope of their training and skills. We're thrilled because they want to stay with us as they move and progress into that new position. So those, I think any of those initiatives we benefit from. The other piece that's a little bit perhaps related and I think important is staff really do wish to feel like they're providing good quality care, and having the metrics to measure that and how we do that is important. So as a province, they're rolling out the Inter-RAI system to allow us to measure quality of care. We've done it at Camp Hill for many years, but really happy to be able to join with the long-term care sector and as in the rollout of the new tool, which will allow us provincial benchmarks and keeping our eye on the importance of delivering good quality care, which is critical, obviously, for service delivery, but also in recruiting and retaining the people we work with.
Thank you. MLA Taggart.
Thank you, Chair. And so, again, I'm for a question for Deputy Minister Barbrick, and I will move on to something else next question. But I have to say that, these committees are pretty educational for me oftentimes. And I knew about a lot of these programs, 2,000 CCAs for free education, free books, a whole deal. And I think the work that you folks are doing in that, like kind of the new, maybe I'll say, thinking outside the box or whatever, but this whole idea of recognition, you said, of prior learning, but also, I call that prior learning kind of life skills. So can you, with respect to, like, say, you spoke of folks that were in home care or dietary, being able to I believe, challenge the exam, identify the places where they may fall a little bit short, and then provide the training for them. Am I correct in that? And could you take that just a step further? Because I really find that really not only awesome for to fill the need for CCAs, but also to give those folks a lift in life. Anyway, if you could just tell us a little bit more about that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Sure, thanks. And that's a tremendous, again, trying to create pathways so it's easy for people to upskill, to make more money, to be connected to a sector that desperately needs them is good for us. So the recognition of prior learning process, people used to pay for that. So they both paid to write the exam, they paid for the training that they needed that was identified as a gap, and now that's all provided free of charge. So we've, like I say, we've got about just shy of 1,000 people over the last 2 years have come through that pathway. So the Health Association of Nova Scotia manages and runs that program on behalf of government. An individual contacts HANDS. It's really easy. It's on their website. There's a portal that they can kind of reach in, and an outreach person will call them and talk to them specifically. There are a number of programs that are close to continuing care assistance across the country that have already been pre-assessed. So if you call and say, I took program X in Ontario, they can immediately say, this is the gap that we'll need to fill for you, and it'll probably take us a couple of months. And that pathway is all predetermined. Then there's other people that maybe have a process of either a different type of training, or they've worked in a continuing care or a disability support program role that might have a little bit more required of them. So CCA training start to finish, if you took a traditional program, takes about 10 months. The recognition of prior learning process can happen in as short as 6 or 8 weeks. They still have to write the exam at the end of the day. That exam is run every second month. It used to be just twice a year. We've increased that with the goal of streamlining things. So there's a number of pathways that are predetermined because a person took a similar course elsewhere in another province, and some are customized assessments based on their experience, and then a determination of the gap. They work with the person to get them through to the gap. They they write the exam, and then they become a certified CCA. And in the meantime, they can be working in a long-term care facility or in home care under supervision as a CCA in training, so they can be earning money while they go through that process, and then when they graduate with their program, then they're paid as a CCA.
Thank you. MLA Coombs.
In my last question, we talked about retention, and you mentioned exit interviews, which I was very happy to hear that actually you are conducting exit interviews. But I'm wondering, from those exit interviews, what did you hear from those leaving that stood out? What was those important pieces? Because you spoke very broadly, so I'm just trying to go into more specifics in this question.
Ms. White.
Our managers do connect with anybody who is leaving and moving on. I think predominantly the main theme that we hear is people are moving on to different clinical opportunities, so often moving into acute care. So it may be a nurse who's come and worked with us and perhaps is seeking an opportunity to do a different clinical area, often more acute. So that could definitely be an opportunity or a reason for why people are going. I would say that is one of the main ones. There are many opportunities right now within Nova Scotia Health, and I think sometimes people are looking for different ways to career path.
Thank you. MLA Ince.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. White, my question is more around veteran status. Now, what I mean by that is you had indicated that currently most of the beds in Camp Hill are for veterans, World War II, the Korean War, and you have indicated that there has been an opening up for other veterans. Given that we are having less and less of those from the World War II and the Korean War, can you really expand or help me understand who's considered a vet and moving forward, and how does that apply?
Ms. White.
Sure. So I'll start with, prior to 2016, we were only able to admit contract-eligible veterans. And then in 2016, Veterans Affairs Canada did expand to the preferred admission cohort. And originally, they had 15 beds that we could allocate to them. Then it went to 25. And then in 2019, it went to 50 beds. This last announcement in November of 2022 did indicate that we could use any of our 108 veteran beds to to allocate to an eligible preferred admission veteran. And that eligibility is determined by Veterans Affairs Canada, but it could include certainly veterans who served post-Korea, served with the Allied Forces, a variety of different, their service history could be quite different, and then the eligibility for benefits is quite a complex process that sits with Veterans Affairs Canada, but it is a much broader cohort now that we are able to admit. And we currently have, under that group, we now have 82 beds as of today that are allocated to that preferred admission cohort. So it's really expanded access a lot for that group since 2016. Yeah.
Thank you. MLA Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the program the government announced was for tuition and books for CCAs for up to 2,000 students. Is that right? So did I hear? I better be careful how I do this because I don't want to use up my question here. I think I heard. I think I heard that 900 students have taken that advantage of that opportunity. So is that correct? And sort of what was the uptake in the first year and the second year? I think we're now into maybe the beginning of our third year. So I'm just sort of wondering how that uptake is going. Thank you.
Thank you, MLA Reagan. By the end of this meeting, hopefully we're going to solve all these situations we're dealing with. That was to Deputy Minister Barbrick, correct?
Yes.
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Yeah, thanks for that question. The 900 was the recognition of prior learning group. We've got about 1,400 in the CCA process. So some have already graduated. So this is year 2 right now. So this kind of calendar or student year, I guess, if you will, is year 2. So right now we've got 1,400, and then there's the work and learn programs and the traditional programs delivered by 8 different institutions. Nova Scotia Community College, as well as 7 private career colleges, are starting at all different times in the year. So it's not like a traditional, everybody starts in September and goes straight through until April. So 1,400 are already enrolled or completed, and then we'll have intake happening all over the upcoming year to finish out year 2. So right now we're very confident that we'll get to the 2,000 in that 2-year time frame, and then most importantly is what do we need in year 3 and year 4 as we move into the future to make sure that we have adequate staff for the sector.
Thank you, Deputy. MLA Taggart.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stevenson, you're not getting away. That's easy. Mr. Stevenson, our government values the healthcare workers in our system and the hard work they do each and every day for Nova Scotians. We understand the recruitment and retention of staff is an ongoing need for all facilities, including Camp Hill. Recent investments in this area such as the expansion of 200 nursing seats have had widespread impacts across the province. And can you give us a little bit of an update or some insight into how this new recruitment and retention package is working?
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. I feel like I'll be building a little bit off of Deputy Minister Barbrick and Ms. White's kind of comments around recruitment and retention work specifically happening within seniors and long-term care environment and Camp Hill specific. Within Action for Health, one of the core pillars associated with this, as you've referenced, is the actual recruitment and retention of a healthy workforce and a healthy healthcare workforce. And all activity and actions that we're really taking across the province are really, largely hinged on that. We need people to be here and be available to work regardless of what the environment is, whether it's in Camp Hill, primary health care, mental health, addictions, and surgery, all kind of key components of the Action for Health strategy. And the strategy really has multiple components to it, as has been referenced by my colleagues. We've heard about the increase in seats and learning opportunities through CCA. You've referenced the increase in the nursing seat components within the province. The piece that I also want to highlight and allude to is the work that's been done to create an easier path for people to have their licenses recognized. So this is a big component of being able to recognize people who work across Canada, but also internationally educated nurses, as Ms. White has referenced as it relates to people coming into Camp Hill, but creating a simpler pathway for people, having partnerships with other countries to kind of recognize those credentials, and working with the colleges to create a simplified and a fast-track pathway for people to come in, has created a great opportunity within the province to fill vacancies faster and to expand in the program areas that we need to. I think to date we've seen a net increase of close to 250 RNs working within the province. So that's a net increase. That's sort of those coming in minus anybody who may be sort of leaving the system or taking on different opportunities. So we are seeing the gains associated with that, not just in the nursing side, but within other programs as well.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. MLA Marcos.
Oh, look at that, I didn't even know. So earlier, when I'd asked a question about improvements in infrastructure, you were able, Deputy Minister Barbrick, to touch on some of the things that government has done in regards to investments and improvements. But I'd actually like to ask the question for the thousands of people and your father at home that are watching this. Millions. Millions of people watching this.
Deputy Minister Barbrick. A lot of pressure on that question.
So I'm going to be a little bit explicit about some of the projects that are underway now, if that's okay. And before I do that, I also want to flag that this last year, we were provided the investment of a $25 million infrastructure fund for existing nursing homes that required upgrades. So up until 2-3 years ago, that annual fund for capital repairs was $1 million a year. So we increased it to 10 million 2 years ago, and we added another 25 million to it this past year, so that existing nursing homes that need general wear and tear upgrades can apply to that fund to get those things. So sometimes that's expanding bathrooms, sometimes that's refreshing paint through the whole building, or replacing flooring, or adding a heat pump. So that fund is available to all of the existing infrastructure that maybe needs a little sprucing up. So that's in addition to the new facilities that we're building. So basically, we've got 3 batches of nursing homes that are being replaced and have been announced over the last couple of years that will be coming online between now and 2027. So that additional capacity in nursing homes, recognizing the wait lists and the demand, is intended to bring us in line with what the demand is showing. So that first batch, Villa Acadienne in Clare Matagan, just opened on Saturday. That's the first of this 34 nursing homes that will be opening in the next couple of years. So brand new, beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at their pictures, their Facebook page has some fantastic pictures of this new facility that they've been building over the last couple of years, because from the idea to build a new nursing home to getting it open and residents in it is really about 3 years. There's a kind of 11-step, very prescribed process where the design happens based on the provincial nursing home standards. That's fairly prescriptive about square footage and some of those things, and then they work with community to get some input on that. Then they go to tender to build that, and so there's a fair amount of pieces along the way to make sure that it's going in the direction it needs to go. So Villa's the first, and it was actually announced in, I think, 2019. It was announced, and so it's just opening now. So that's not an unusual staging for some of these builds that, you know, from the vision to the implementation takes a bit of time. So those, Escazone is another nursing home that will be opening early in the new year. So that's a partnership between Nova Scotia and the federal government to build a facility in Escazone that's culturally responsive to the needs of the community, designed by the community, and will be available in the new year. So, and then there's another batch of about 7 that were announced in 2021. Those are all well underway to be built right now, and you'll see Mahone Bay is probably our next one to open early in the new year, or actually late this fiscal, or late this calendar year. So those are all going to add additional capacity to the system. And as you all know, we've talked about ALC beds in hospitals. We need to make sure that people and residences are in the place that provide the care that they need and not in an inappropriate place. So then the next batch that comes online was announced in June 2021. There's another 13 that are building now. You've probably all seen the lists, and all of them are progressing as they should. The opportunity we took last year was any of those builds that hadn't started to progress quite far down the design stage. We actually tucked a few beds extra in communities where we knew that there was pressure and wait lists were, requiring that people be in places that is really not the goal. So those facilities between now and 2027, tremendous opportunity there in Halifax alone, or Central Zone, where there is the greatest pressure in the province for nursing home beds. A lot of that is in migration into the city and other population growth kind of things, but we're adding a net 818 beds to Halifax, or HRM, that will help with that wait list, and of course with the QE2, all of the goals around surgery, wait times, and all those sorts of things that will help support that.
Thank you. MLA Coombs.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Barbrick, I'm wondering if you could tell me how long is the current wait list? And also within that, can you tell me how many of those on the wait list are currently in hospital awaiting for a long-term care bed?
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Yeah, our wait times are all online, and the last quarter was just updated, or wait lists rather. We have about 1,700 people in the province that have been assessed by a continuing care coordinator as being eligible for a long-term care facility. Of that list, about 75% of those people have home care supports at home while they wait. The second question. Oh, yes. So waiting in hospital. So there's sort of two numbers around waiting in hospital. One are those that have been fully assessed and medically discharged from the hospital while they wait. The other is a bit of a projection on how many people might be needing nursing homes in the next little bit. So the people that are in a nursing home or in a hospital bed right now that are waiting for a nursing home is about 250 people. And so some of those folks are waiting for supports to transition back home with sufficient home care that allows them to stay home a little bit longer. And some of those are waiting for a nursing home that matches their placement criteria. So when we talked about those that might self-identify for Camp Hill and our 67 nursing home beds, people have the ability to make a choice about where they want to be. So oftentimes someone will identify, if I pick the facility, I live in Fall River, the facility that's closest to me has about 85 beds. If I identify that as my primary preference and wait for that bed to come available, it might be a while till that one comes available. So we work with people that are waiting for a nursing home to give them the chance to pick kind of as many reasonable facilities in the geographic area of their family as possible to try to get them matched to a nursing home as soon as possible.
Thank you. MLA Taggart, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. White, I guess before I ask this question, I will comment that you're fortunate that, and you may not be aware because of your, but in that you've recently received a new veteran from my home community, and I assure you that he will be an asset. I understand his body might be failing a little bit, but his mind hasn't, and he will be an asset to you folks and the other veterans that are there. My question is, and he's also a fellow Legion member of mine, comrade, I guess is the proper word. But anyway, you mentioned earlier in your statements about the program, about programming the ways in which Legions participate in residence events. I would like to expand. I'd like you to expand on that a little bit, if you would, because I know that Legions are extremely important to veterans' care, and however, many people in the general public are not aware of what the Legions do, kind of outside the walls of their buildings. So, can you give us a little, little information on that, please?
Ms. White.
Absolutely. So there's a number of different ways that that the Legions are involved. They assist at all of our commemorative events with a color party and with a show of support at every commemorative event that we have. Different Legions will also host the veterans. They'll come in and do a strawberry social, I think happened this summer by one of the Legions, and so they'll come in and have do events with us. They also helped, they'll support on an individual basis, sometimes veterans or veterans who would have belonged to their branches in the past. So I know we've, supported kind of connecting branches with veterans and having that ongoing connection and comradeship is important. They attend our memorial services that we have, and again, demonstrating their respect for those who have passed. So I think there's just a variety of different ways that they do engage and support veterans throughout the whole year.
Thank you. MLA Barkos, and then MLA Reagan, and then MLA Ince.
So just a comment before I start. I think my heart sunk. So this is very dear to my heart, 17 years working with seniors. And so when you had stated that there was $1 million for upkeep of the nursing homes, I almost cried a little bit and could now understand, some of the things the nursing homes went through. But it leads me to ask this question to Deputy Minister Barbrick or Ms. White, whomever can answer. Back in 2021, when we inherited a staffing crisis in healthcare, due to years of neglect, our government knew we needed to get more healthcare and fast, our healthcare workers and fast into the system. But we also knew we needed long-term solutions as well. In October of 2021, our government announced an investment of $2.5 million to increase the number of nurse practitioners working in long-term care. Can you tell us how this funding will support long-term care? The long-term care sector, and what benefits we are seeing now with nursing practitioners, my son's calling me, nurse practitioners working in the system.
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Thanks for that question. That's almost a two-pronged approach, because we, Department of Health and Nova Scotia Health, work very closely to make sure that there's primary care coverage for the nursing homes across the province, because we go to great lengths to ensure that people that live in nursing homes or long-term care facilities are not unnecessarily making trips to emergency rooms, both for the experience of the resident as well as the emergency room kind of, not being the appropriate place for a resident of a nursing home. So we've got a number of things in place. In Central Zone, there's a care by design plan with physicians in Central Zone that's a little bit unique to Central. But some of our more rural nursing homes, primary care coverage can be a challenge depending on what's happening in that community. So that funding was to support 13 nurse practitioners in communities that were identified as a priority. And that nurse practitioner, so I think 11 of the 13 of those are filled, and a couple are vacant because of all the reasons we've talked about. People move positions, and every place has its own unique circumstance when it comes to recruiting. And those nurse practitioners do really support that community, but part of their practice is to support the local nursing home as well. And in many cases, if it's something that's outside the scope of practice of the nurse practitioner, which isn't very much these days, they have an on-call referral process with a family physician that can support those. So what those 11 nurse practitioners filled, or the 13 that are funded, does is significantly reduce the pressure for primary care and reduce emergency room unnecessary visits when it's things that can be treated in the facility and don't require a trip to the emergency room. Different if it's something like a broken hip, but if it's urinary tract infections or chest infection, they can often be treated on site, and we all want to avoid those visits. So those nurse practitioners are part of the primary care solution for communities that have been identified as a priority.
Thank you, Deputy. MLA Reagan.
So I have an older gentleman in my riding who reached out to my office last week, and we had a good chat with him. And he's in his 90s. He's living on his own, but he's recognized that he needs some help. And so we reached out to the department so he could get assessed, and we haven't heard anything back. So I'm just wondering, what's the time that you generally expect? Somebody makes a referral or they call in for assistance. How long does it take before that process really gets underway and this person gets assessed and some help?
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
So the return phone call should have happened in 48 hours. If it hasn't, you provide me the contact information and we'll track that all down. So initial contact is within 48 hours. The assessment process, depending on the screening, so the conversation on the phone between a continuing care assessment or continuing care coordinator and the client, depending on what's identified there, the actual assessment is prioritized based on what they identify. So it can be as quick if it's in a kind of crisis situation in a family. It can be as quick as a couple of days. If it's something that somebody has said, it's probably soon for me to start to think about times to get some support, then it can take a couple of weeks. Okay. So the assessment process, of course, is key. It's a bit of an unlock to all the other services around home care. I will flag, though, that things like the Capable program that we announced a while back, that is really where a person, with the goal of supporting people at home, it's based out of the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and we are going to try a pilot of 300 families here in Nova Scotia. And what that does is have an RN, an occupational therapist, and a handy person work together with the family to assess the goals and what can be done in the household to make it amenable to support somebody longer. And the whole intention of Capable is it's not part of the continuing care assessment process, because we actually want services to be available outside of that. So if somebody really needs support with kind of activities of daily living in their home, or they've got safety issues or personal health issues that they might need nursing support, that's the right path for continuing care assessments. Things like Capable, we're going to try some services that don't require that assessment pathway. But absolutely, if there's somebody out there that's not gotten a call back, let me know who it is. We'll follow up.
Thank you. MLA Ince.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wright, How many of our veterans receiving care in the facility don't have a family doctor? Do you have an idea?
Ms. White.
So for everyone who's a resident at Camp Hill, they're all would be under the care of one of the physicians that we have within our team. We are actively recruiting still 4 physicians, but they are all covered currently by a family physician that's part of our inpatient care team. Yep.
MLA Coombs.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Barbrick, in this summer, I received a very sad letter, and I'm just going to read it. And I'm going to leave the name out. I was diagnosed, it says, quote, I was diagnosed with ALS in 2020. I was admitted to the Cape Breton Regional Hospital in April while waiting to be placed in long-term care. I was on the priority list for admittance to Harbourstone. Everything was in place and moving quickly for my placement, including extra funding from ALS Society to hire extra staff to meet all my care needs. I was notified 2 weeks ago that Harbourstone was no longer an option because they were not able to hire a CCA. Today I was notified by continuing care that, one second here. Today I was, today I was notified by continuing care that long-term care in Olive Cape, that I was not able to go in, that Harbourstone was no longer an option because they were not able to hire a CCA. Today I was notified by continuing care that long-term care in Olive Cape Breton is not an option due to staffing issues. After months of languishing in a hospital room, this feels unacceptable to me. That it was given to me to be a sure thing by my social worker in continuing care. I'm reaching out to you for any help or direction you could offer me to make my last days peaceful and comfortable. I'm just wondering, with regards to our CCAs, that this is, to me, the human example, the human cost of not having enough CCAs in our system. So I'm wondering, I think we can all say that this is not acceptable. I think that, but how has this been allowed to happen? And how do we stop it from continuing to occur? Because it seems to me from the conversations that we've had today, it's rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. We're hearing, Director White had mentioned that she's often losing people to acute care. And people are on the wait list waiting, people who LPNs and that who have been hired but we're waiting for them to be released from the positions that they're in. So that means they're coming from another sector of our healthcare. So to me, that just seems like we're just moving people around rather than truly filling all the gaps. So how do we fill the gaps and stop moving people around, filling other holes, while making another hole somewhere else?
Deputy Minister Barbrick.
Yeah, thanks for that. That sounds like it must be a very difficult case and likely a very complex situation, so I won't discuss that here. As always, you can reach out to me if you want to share that more specifically with me. We agree with the deck chair philosophy, and Colin and I and all kinds of other people spend a lot of time about the deck chairs. So people have choice, and they're going to make choice, and they're going to choose to move through different parts of the sector, and I don't think we want to change that. If we want a lifetime of commitment to the sector, part of that is, having choice in those options. That's why I find the compelling stories, the things like the work and learn model. Those are people that have worked in continuing care generally, that know they're attracted to the sector and want to work a couple of days a week and go to school a few days a week, and that's how they get trained. Those are people we're going to keep in the sector. I'm convinced of it. The other is the recognition of prior learning. I think that's the same scenario. We've got people that have had a little exposure to the sector. They know that's of interest. They want to upskill. That's bringing new people into the sector. I agree. Like, we need new net new. We don't want to just keep moving people around. So those kinds of creative, innovative ways of identifying people that are drawn to the sector and want to work in it, that we can help make it as easy as possible to become certified and work in the sector. The other is the immigration pathway. Immigration is just one, one kind of piece of the puzzle. It's not the panacea on its own. All of this knits together. So, for instance, if we have an internationally trained RN that is identified as having a bit of a gap, but they can practice as a CCA, and it's going to take them a year, we'll happily take that person to be a CCA because they get exposure to the sector. And when they become an LPN or an RN, I want them to love this sector. I don't want them to want to leave the sector. So I agree, this is all about net new for us, not moving bodies around, although people, of course, have choice in how they want to spend their career. But I agree.
Thank you. And I would like to ask MLA Coombs, you read from an email, so I'd like to please print that and table the email. Yeah, and any names can be redacted, but please table that when you get a chance. MLA Craig. Oh, names can't be redacted. I was under the direction that they could, so just bear with me a second. Okay, so you can just table that email when you get a chance, please. Thank you. MLA Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as we are almost to the 3:40 mark, Deputy Barbrick, please take as much time as you want to answer this. Certainly we've got the relationship, the physical proximity for the Camp Hill and the infirmary. I've walked those halls many times, and of course Abbey Lane is there as well. But certainly with the that relationship and the way that services are exchanged and so on, how is that being taken into consideration with the redevelopment of the QE2 and that proximity and how things are working? And feel free to pass it off to anybody else, any of your other colleagues. I see you winking and nodding, and Mr. Stevenson is actually there wanting to answer the question, but please.
Thank you, MLA Craig. Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. And I think I can probably offer a little bit in the sense of the Halifax Infirmary expansion project, and Ms. White can probably talk about the value of the relationship between Camp Hill and the infirmary in its current. So maybe just to start, the expansion from an infrastructure perspective within the province, specific to the central zone, and the decision and the direction that kind of started in December of last year really was to focus on growing what the infrastructure was for the delivery of services within this part of the province because of the shifting and the changing population. And that includes looking at opportunities not just within the Halifax Infirmary, but really across the zone, so HRM and beyond, really to make sure that there's the appropriate number of beds, make sure that we have the right number of ORs and the right size and capacity within emergency departments. So I would say that the expectations around the use of infrastructure within this part of the province is growing beyond just what, as was announced last December, it's growing beyond just what was originally contemplated within the Halifax Infirmary expansion project. As that project sort of stands, which is kind of focused on expanding the tertiary care capacity and some of the primary secondary capacity within this particular area, there is no intention to actually use Camp Hill space as part of the Halifax Infirmary expansion project. Now I say that, and I go back to our intention really is to make sure that we're maximizing the use of all of our existing capacity, which is why we're looking at what could be done in Dartmouth, what could be done in Cobequid, how is the Bayers Lake Cloud River Outpatient Center being used, the concepts of transition to community facilities and finding additional capacity. So really, I would say we're not leaving any stone unturned at this point and trying to make sure that we're using the infrastructure we have to the best of the ability within the province to make sure we're meeting the needs of the residents of Nova Scotia. and Ms. White may want to comment on some of the value associated with the proximity between Camp Hill and the infirmary.
Ms. White.
So certainly in terms of the proximity between Camp Hill and the QE2, it certainly does, there's a number of advantages. I guess first off, we are co-located within the Camp Hill Veterans Memorial Building with Geriatrics, and that certainly allows some clinical synergies and sharing of knowledge and expertise between the subspecialists of geriatricians and those within the building. As well, being physically contingent does allow subspecialists to come over and offer consults and access to diagnostics for veterans who live there. That is by virtue of being geographically co-located, and I think Camp Hill has had such a long and rich history, and that within the QE2 complex of providing care to veterans, and that significance is enduring.
Thank you. We're almost at the 3:40 mark, so I think what we'll do is we will now ask our witnesses. Thank you very much for the great conversation today. We'd like to ask our witnesses who have come in today if they have any closing comments, and maybe we'll do a reverse order to end. Ms. White, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to share?
No, just to thank you for the opportunity to come this afternoon. We, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have a strong team at Camp Hill, and we remain very committed to providing outstanding care to veterans.
Thank you very much. Deputy Minister Barbrick?
Thank you for having us.
Okay. And Mr. Stevenson, any final remarks?
Thank you for having us.
Short to the point.
Yep.
So thank you again. And at this point, what we'll do to allow our witnesses to leave and to get back to our committee business, we'll take maybe a 3 or 4 minute, 3-minute recess, and then we'll get back to our committee business. We're at recess. Order. Order. I'd like to ask all committee members to please come to their seats, and we'll carry on with our committee business. The first thing is some correspondence received from Deputy Minister LaFlèche. He has proposed that Deputy Minister Dana McKenzie take his place for the topic impacts on veterans and military families amidst the cost of living crisis.
Mr. Chair, is it Dana or Dana?
I would have to go to the clerk for the pronunciation.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. So Deputy Minister LaFlèche has proposed that Deputy Minister Dana McKenzie take his place for the topic impacts on veterans and military families amidst the cost of living crisis. So he's made that request prior to the changes in the public service, as we know, and he had mentioned that Ms. McKenzie might be better suited to speak on the topic. So is there any discussion around that? We're fine. The committee's good on that. All right, we'll move on. The Royal Canadian Legion Nova Scotia Nunavut Command has a new executive director. Ms. Mitchell-Vino has been replaced by Mr. Craig Hood, and so he will be attending in Ms. Mitchell-Vino's place in one of the upcoming meetings, likely in December. So there's no discussion on that. I understand that. Very good. The next topic, representatives from the Atlantic Center for Trauma have asked to appear virtually to discuss peer support and community facilities at our next meeting. And is there any discussion on their request to appear virtually? Everyone's in agreement? That's fine? Okay. Oh, MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as long as Ledge TV is all good, then I'm all good for it, so.
So is Ledge TV good? We're good.
Okay.
All right. Excellent.
Those are the experts.
Yes, indeed. So we'll move on then to our next discussion piece, the approval of the annual report that we all would have received. I guess I'll have a motion that we accept the, is there any discussion first, I guess I should ask. All right, I'll have a motion, please. MLA Barkos.
I move that the Veterans Affairs Committee approve the annual report.
Motion on the table. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, MLA McDonald. Very good. Our next discussion piece is a conversation around changing the format of our Veterans Affairs Committee in the question period, go from hand raising to 20-20-20. And it looks like MLA Reagan wants to have a discussion on that. MLA Reagan.
I would just say I would fully support that as long as there's time afterwards as well, which I'm assuming there is. You just divvy up the time afterwards. Because today, there were times where our witnesses would say something and I would have, follow-up questions that I'd like to ask. And then I had to put up my hand again and again and again. So I would say that seems to me to be a great idea.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Glad you're stopping today, Howard.
So is there a general agreement then? I don't think we need to put that to a vote. There a general agreement around the table that we will move the question process to 20-20-20?
Agreed.
Okay, agreed. That's taken care of.
Who gets the first 20?
It will always be the opposition, and then comes to the governing. Welcome to Veterans Affairs.
Honorable Steve Gray.
Yes. So at that, there's nothing else really to discuss, except I just wanted to throw it out there on the table to our committee members. This Saturday, there is a walk for veterans that is taking place in Halifax. I'll be attending, so it's the 6th Annual Canadian Walk for Veterans. So if anyone's interested in attending that, that'll be this weekend coming up, Saturday. MLA Barkos.
Is there any way to make sure everyone on the committee gets the time, place, and all the information?
So I will send this through to our clerk, and then they can send it through to everybody. Thank you. Okay. So, with that being said, our next meeting will be November 21st. There'll be no October meeting where we're going back in the House. At this point, November 21st is the next meeting, and the topic for that will be peer support and community facilities. The witnesses will be Rally Point Retreat, Landing Strong, Replenish around Shipmates Retreat, and the Atlantic Center for Trauma. So with that being said, I will adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.